Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 10th of April 2025. We're going to talk about military aid. And we're going to start. I've got quite a bit to talk to you about because it's been a good week since I've last done one of these. So, quite a few nuggets have been accumulated here. Um, this is General Cavoli speaking to a select hearing in the United States recently, and I said this is well worth listening to. There was a part of his opening remarks that I think were incredibly important. I'm going to play you now. I often talk about what is it that the Americans have over the Ukrainians that gives them this leverage. Why is it that Ukrainians keep coming back to the United States and don't just kind of dismiss them when they appear to be acting on behalf of the Russians in the negotiations? And my biggest, well, my I think most plausible theory is that they are absolutely vital, the Americans, in terms of targeting particular missiles, ballistic missiles, but also just in their intelligence for gathering current intelligence using particular satellites with particular capabilities uh, to get targets for the Ukrainians. I think that they provide something that the Europeans and other allies will struggle to do, certainly quickly. So this is what Cavoli says about this.
Ukrainians depend on us principally, uniquely, I should say,
Uniquely.
for their high-end anti-aircraft systems. So the things that shoot down the ballistic missiles and the long-range attack missiles that the Russians throw at them almost daily, that is mainly supplied by the United States. That would have an obvious effect.
So it said uniquely and then mainly supplied by the United States. Whether that means that there are SAMP-T air defense systems that are somewhat equivalent to the Patriot PAC-3 missile systems that can shoot down ballistic missiles, or whether he said uniquely beginning at the beginning there, but then said mainly provided by the US. So it could be that other nations are providing Patriots, and actually, when he says mainly provided by the US, most of the Patriots are provided by um, other nations. But he might therefore just be talking about the Patriot being an American system, and therefore we are mainly providing their ability to strike ballistic missiles, etc., etc. So, okay, maybe a bit of a lack of clarity there in what he meant by unique and then mainly. But he continues.
If the Ukrainians were not able to receive intelligence from us, they would struggle to target, especially in depth, operational level targets such as command post, logistics areas, and things like that, which require a specific way to. You've got to have very good intelligence to do that, and they would struggle to do that. I do have to.
And that's super important. They would struggle to do deep strikes. Even like not really massively deep strikes, but actually kind of medium range strikes behind the contact line into logistics areas, but maybe also, it's both, isn't it? That's incredibly important for Ukraine to be able to do. What is it? Amateurs talk about tactics, professionals talk about logistics. And the Ukrainians have done such a wonderful job over the course of the war of hammering the Russian logistics. But how much is that down to the assistance that's provided by the Americans?
To note that the Ukrainians have developed alternative sources. Many of our allies have stepped up their ability to produce things for the Ukrainians. Czechia this month is delivering more than 70,000 rounds of 155. So there are some real advances. There's some diversification of their supply sources, but undoubtedly the Ukrainians are very dependent on our assistance.
Through how
they are very dependent on our assistance. There you go. Now, we've heard Sirski say that US aid has dropped and the main support now does come from Europe, but we must also rely on our own strength. We have had success in the production of artillery and quite significant successes with electronic warfare, said Sirski. and therefore I go back to, okay, the US aren't really providing the volume of ammunition and equipment they were previously, but there are these key areas, and I think it's intelligence and the ability to strike deep and to take out ballistic missiles. It's acquiring these targets that I think the Americans are world leaders in, and the Europeans would struggle to close that gap if the Americans refuse to do even that. It's worth looking at what Americans think, keep ahead of their views and in the general public there. In terms of support, continued support for Ukraine. The Wall Street Journal survey has recently shown that 83% of Democrats supported continuing US financial aid to Ukraine, 79% of Republicans opposed it. It's insanely partisan. It's hyper partisan. Overall, 49% of voters supported continuing aid to Ukraine and 44% opposed it. So, yeah, really running along party lines. And that's going to be very much informed by what people are saying at the top, from Tucker Carlson to David Sachs, from JD Vance to Donald Trump. It seems like the MAGA Republican Party is now sitting against Ukraine. But there you go. So there is a graph there for you to see, and that's actually that's to do with Greenland there. But yeah, Wall Street Journal survey throwing up some interesting figures there. Now, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary General, no, he's not. He's the chap in charge of the American DoD, Department of Defense. He is going to now be turning up to the Ramstein meeting, which is the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, the group of 50 or so allies that meet every so often, and they're going to meet tomorrow uh, to talk about what aid needs to go to Ukraine. Hegseth was not going to join. In fact, there was going to be no American presence at all at the meeting. Now he's going to join virtually. So that's, I think good news. I think the Americans do need a seat at the table. Hegseth is to join the Ramstein summit online, and it will take place in Brussels, otherwise under the chairmanship of the UK and Germany. Interesting that Germany are also part of that. Okay, and now on to Ukraine is ready to purchase a major aid package from the US, considering it a security guarantee, Zelensky said. How much of this is the Ukrainians needing this stuff and they can only get it from the Americans? And how much is this them trying to butter the Americans up to have some kind of leverage? I don't know. The package, including air defense systems, would be financed by Ukraine in one form or another. Ukraine has already requested at least 10 air defense systems, says Null reports. Interesting. I assume that there's going to be Patriot systems and interceptors on that shopping list. Ukraine can produce air defense systems and missiles for themselves, but we need localization and licenses from our partners, says Zelensky. And I think the intention would be to build some of their own Patriot interceptors and indeed systems so that there isn't this bottleneck. They're not relying on the US, even signing it off in, or I guess signing off them jumping above other nations who are waiting for their own interceptors and missile systems. If they can produce them themselves under license, then that gets around that issue. Ukraine has received only half of their Patriot air defense systems that they requested. Remember, the US did say they were going to, get them other systems, and this was under, I think, Rubio and Hegseth, but operating just 6 out of the 25 needed for full coverage. A shortage of missiles intensifies the issue. Ukraine now facing limited supplies of PAC-3, MSE, and GEM-T missiles, so the ability to shoot down ballistic missiles is possibly going to be compromised soon, or already has been. This is desperate for the Ukrainians. They definitely need as much help as they can get in this area, as they always have. But it seems that now that the US has kind of stepped back from helping Ukraine, things are getting tougher for them in terms of shooting down ballistic missiles. Uh, and indeed, it looks like in terms of shooting down Shahed drones as their interception rates have dropped. Zelensky says that he's instructed the Minister of Defense and the Minister of Foreign Affairs to intensify contacts with partners on air defense in the context of Ramstein and meetings being prepared. There are two main tasks: air defense, Patriot and Patriots in particular, and the second task is contingents. I'm not quite sure what that means in this context, but yeah, the US is instructed to work on air defense on a bilateral basis, and especially with the US, which has sufficient potential to help stop any terror, says Max 24. A bit confusing wordage there. But again, it's all in the same domain of the US being super important for Ukraine in terms of air defense and the very best air defense, the shooting down of ballistic missiles. So, there needs to be work bilaterally between the two, uh, possibly going to be a big purchase from Ukraine of American equipment in that domain, but they would also really like to build it themselves. Now, the US is to relocate troops and equipment away from the key Ukraine aid hub in Poland. The US Army Europe and Africa Command announced on April the 8th that American personnel and equipment will be relocated from Poland's Jasionka airport, a key logistics hub for delivering military aid to Ukraine. Again, more evidence that the US is stepping back. Of course, they're not providing as much equipment, so they might not need their troops there so much, but then obviously they're going to be very helpful in coordinating all sorts of deliveries from all sorts of nations, I would have thought. But either way, this is a reflection that of the fact that the US really have taken a back seat in continued aid to Ukraine. They're also, there are claims that they're going to have to cut 90,000 frontline staff in the DoD, and so soldiers and whatnot, and so there are moves probably afoot to remove a number of the American personnel from the European theatre back to the US. Now, for defense needs, Ukraine will receive another 2.1 billion euros from frozen Russian assets by the end of the month, said Kaya Kallas. That's excellent news. And the aforementioned Czechia, the Czech initiative for ammunition, is still working effectively. Ukraine could receive 2 million artillery shells by the end of the year, said Kallas again. Since we started the dialogue with the member states, Ukraine has already received over 1 million shells in the form of orders or promises. I will continue to work to ensure that we reach the 2 million mark this year. Interesting that orders and promises, not necessarily the equipment itself in the hands of the Ukrainians, but nonetheless, good news. Norway is providing another 415 million euros for artillery ammunition in Ukraine, according to the country's government. So the Norwegians really stepping up. Then we saw the Belgian Prime Minister over in Ukraine recently. He has said that Belgium will deliver 2 F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine this year and another 2 next year. I think the 2 this year are going to be for spare parts. He also unveiled a 1 billion euro aid package for Ukraine in 2025 with annual funding for defense. So that's good news from Belgium. They do have a very active arms industry, by the way, Belgium. Now, representatives of 10 of the Belgian defense companies arrived with the Prime Minister to discuss joint weapons production and investments in manufacturing in Ukraine. The Ukrainian side reached 3 agreements with Belgian producers, according to Zelensky. So that's good news. I'm surprised it took them so long. As someone said, it took Belgium only 3 years to make this decision, but I guess better late than never. Yeah, Belgians weren't exactly quick off the mark there, but good to see them involved. Now, here is a thread from some chap, Alexander X, who is working to replace or restore Ukrainian works of art destroyed by Russia. So that's what he does. But he's made a post on the use of F-16s or the F-16s being supplied to Ukraine. Now, he said the F-16s being supplied to Ukraine come with serious limitations that make them incapable of taking on Russian aircraft in an air-to-air combat role or of destroying them on the airfields. Here are the details. Outdated radars. Ukraine's F-16s are equipped with a mechanically steered array, MSA, AN APG 66 version 2, radar, an older model that was superseded in later model F-16s by the AN/APG 68 series. The latest models of the F-16 sold with the latter radar are equipped with the version 9 model. This is a radar that is less capable even than the versions of the MiG-29's NO-19 radar that have been upgraded by our own industry. Ukraine needs the power and range of modern active electronically scanned array AESA radars found in newer F-16 versions. Link 16 hardware has been removed, so making matters worse, all of the aircraft sent to Ukraine thus far have had their Link 16 hardware removed. Without this, the effective ranges of which we are able to engage Russian aircraft is about 1/3 of the range at which their fighter aircraft can fire on us. This effectively makes it impossible for us to use the F-16 for air-to-air missions. The best we can do is to employ the aircraft in trying to use short-range missiles to shoot down Russian drones or air-launched cruise missiles and glide bombs. We then tried to integrate the US-made AIM-9X onto the MiG-29. So the AIM-9X is used in the NASAMS air defense systems, but it's an air-to-air missile. But the people from Raytheon, the missiles manufacturer, then objected to us using the missile in this way on our own fighters. So the critical points: without Link 16, not only are F-16s unable to fire longer range air-to-air missiles, which could permit them to take out Russian bomber aircraft before they launch their cruise missiles at Ukrainian cities, they're also unable to fire the long-range US AGM-158 Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff missiles, the JASSMs, that could take out Russian bombers while they are still at their bases on the ground. Note that some of this may not have been done on purpose. Remember, these were aircraft that the nations were looking to replace with more state-of-the-art aircraft anyway, and which have been sourced from a number of donor nations, not from the US. The US has not sent any F-16s. And he's underlined that part because that's a really important point. And in fact, often Americans themselves talk about how America have been, behind F-16s getting to the US, to Ukraine, but actually largely hasn't been the case, although they do train pilots, etc. The F-16 sent to Ukraine are AB variants that were produced in the 80s. They've had midlife upgrades done on them to extend structural integrity, as well as upgrading mission computers for newer munitions and better target management. However, these are not the same machines as the latest CD or EF or new V variants that could drop the Russians out of the sky and kill air defense from outside their engagement ranges. Consider that these jets are Block 1020 designs, whereas contemporary F-16s are Block 70. Not to mention the challenge of getting their radios, crypto, and data links to work with existing non-NATO infrastructure. So the F-16s supplied are good as a defense against drone attacks inside Ukraine, but they're not capable of taking out Russian aircraft. And obviously, that is what is critically needed. He said, but please note the F-16s are not useless. I'm sorry if my above post gave that impression. They just can't stop the Russian Air Force from using deadly glide bombs on our troops, and cannot attack the aircraft regularly, killing civilians in our cities. This is what they can and do. They eliminate cruise missile threats and conduct bombing operations against the Russian army in the east. Please note we are very grateful to the nations donating these aircraft. I'm deeply, deeply sorry if it gave the impression I wasn't. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it needs to be said. If this is indeed true, then yeah, we need to be aware of this. Okay. Ukraine invests $25 million themselves in weapons component production. Ukraine's economy ministry offers equipment grants to weapons component producers with special conditions for frontline regions and drone manufacturers. So they're really trying to ramp up all areas of their munitions, their defense industry. And there's a drone designed to intercept Shaheeds. It's been shown to the public for the first time, operating at an altitude of up to 5 kilometers, reaching a speed of up to 200 kilometers an hour. In just 2 months of operation, it has already shot down over 20 Shahed drones and nearly 10 reconnaissance drones. This is super important. You've got this sort of small drone there, relatively small drone, isn't it? That appears to look quite futuristic, quite cool. Yeah, that is being used already to take out Russian Shahed-style drones. Now we're going to talk about Yuko Prom. Yeah, let's finish there. the state-owned defense conglomerate from Ukraine, strengthening military technical ties with Denmark, discussing tech exchange, production cooperation, and potential investments. This partnership aims to boost Ukraine's defense capabilities with Danish industry expertise. Good news there. Fiber optic drones with a 20-kilometer range are now in action on the front lines, says Commander-in-Chief General Syrski. In March alone, drones hit over 77,000 Russian targets, which is 10% more than in February. That is a massive uptick in that time. So that's really, really important. Drones have finally caught up with artillery in terms of hit percentage, he added. Wow. And then Sweden will produce Polish drones for the Ukrainian Defense Forces, according to Defense 24. So nations working together to help Ukraine. They're the Poles and the Swedes working to produce some Polish drones. I don't know what ones they are. I know they've used Warmate drones, but that haven't seen them being used for some time, to be honest. Ukrainian armed forces showcased the German HF-1 AI strike drones. As per Bild, the German tabloid, over 1,000 have been delivered by April with AI targeting. They fly 100 kilometers through, though troops favor the 45 to 50 kilometer range for up to an hour of flight. That is, yeah, really good. These are drones that I think are going to be provided quite a lot by Germany, and with AI targeting, that's going to be super, super useful. The city of Reims will donate 3 of its buses to the city of Chernihiv. These vehicles will be used as school buses and will not be empty. They will be filled with books, IT equipment, and other items. Excellent stuff. So the French helping out there, or in fact, the city of Reims. I love it how it's not just about state help; it's often regional administrations helping out Ukraine. The Estonian MOD will allocate 5 million euros to the IT coalition in support of Ukraine. The funding will help scale the digital capabilities of the Ukrainian Defense Forces as part of Estonia's ongoing efforts to provide critical equipment. We are hearing that Canada has delivered 40,000 of those engines I talked about previously for the 70mm CRV-7 unguided air-to-surface rockets to Ukraine, according to the Canadian Unified Mission. I wonder whether these rocket engines can be utilized in different munitions that can then be adapted and used by the Ukrainians. But that's really good news. I think did they not have 80,000 of these? But anyway, they've delivered 40,000, so that's fantastic. Military aid to Ukraine for Jeff 2146 and his list has been updated with the delivery of an unknown number of PC 065B engineering vehicles, part of Japan's 100 vehicle pledge. They've not been previously added to the list, so I don't know how many of these, but Japanese engineering vehicle they're being used by the Ukrainians, so they've definitely got at least some of them. Good news there. But also, he's updated his list with 36 Czech provided T-72 and T-72M1 main battle tanks. I don't know when they've been delivered. I don't know if that's like totally recent or going back in time, and those have already been on the battlefield for months and months. So I'm not quite sure about that one, but they might have themselves 36 T-72 tanks, which would be really good for them, obviously. Now, the UK is planning to purchase software and equipment service packages worth £414,756 for Ukraine's Central Election Commission as part of the Technology Assistance Project, TAP. This will help out with their elections, one presumes, when they eventually happen. So good news from the UK there, as well as also providing the largest humanitarian convoy from Great Britain in 3 years. It's on its way to Ukraine. The 8th humanitarian convoy organised by Fire Aid UK, the National Fire Chiefs Council, with support from the British government and the Ministry of the Interior, is already underway, reports the press service of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine. The convoy includes 30 units of fire and rescue equipment and over 15,000 units of specialized equipment. This is the largest aid in recent years, and it will save the lives of Ukrainians, noted Ukrainian rescue workers. And that's reported in Ukraine now. So that's excellent. The UK really coming together in the domain of fire and rescue equipment. And that's great to see. Absolutely brilliant. Obviously, all will be left-hand, right-hand drive, but there you go. That's life. Go over it. Germany has not publicly funded Ukraine's access to Eutelsat satellite internet for about a year, according to the company's CEO. Speaking to Reuters, Ukraine currently has fewer than 1,000 terminals for connecting to the Eutelsat network. And of course, Europe really needs to get behind this if they are going to allow Eutelsat and European tech companies to provide viable alternatives to Starlink and Elon Musk's systems. Right, a few bits on Russia. We're going to start with this. Russia has a capacity to mobilize 5 million trained troops, according to the commander in chief of the Ukrainians, General Syrsky. Russia can mobilize 5 million troops who have undergone military service, while its overall mobilization capacity is 20 million. Still a real challenge for the Ukrainians, isn't it? Russia has increased its force in Ukraine, quote, fivefold since the beginning of the aggression. Syrsky said in an interview, putting the number of Russian troops currently deployed in the country at 623,000. Absolutely phenomenal. Russia's People's Defense Crew showed off their DIY rolling grenades meant to tumble through terrain and take out bunkers. This invention supposedly boosts attacks on fortified spots. I don't know. I've not heard of these being used, but obviously the concept is pretty simple. There, it's a rolling hand grenade that gives, I guess, the thrower the ability to do something. To roll stuff, but that could be pretty useful. Here we have a significant explosion happening as they roll that down into a tree line, and they do look pretty damned powerful. So, there is that. Satellite images show that Russia is racing to build. I've reported this, but just throwing it into the military aid as well. Is racing to build a vessel that dwarfs the Moskva missile cruiser. So remember that was a flagship ship that was sunk by a Ukrainian Neptune missile. The flagship of the Black Sea Fleet destroyed by Ukraine in the early days of the war. So they are building this in Kerch, in the Kerch shipyard in Crimea. So, like, surely it is ripe for a strike. But Russians still busily building ships to throw into, one presumes, this war. But somewhat vulnerable, I would argue. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully that was of use. Take care, and I'll speak to you guys soon.